Story 1. If my foot is not in the middle of the step on an escalator, my shoe will get caught and rip my leg off. Story 2. I have an irrational fear that I am walking down the street and someone suddenly appears behind me and stabs me in the neck. I think about it every day. I do not know why. Story 3. The fear of being afraid is hard to explain. It is anxiety about the idea of being afraid or having a panic attack, which can ruin our moment and that of others. I hope that is clear. Story 4. I am very afraid of fungal infections. There should be a medicine that can clear them in one use. Story 5. Being pranked in a Walmart. I am already bad at taking jokes, so I cannot imagine what I would do if I were being filmed as well. Story 6. Accidentally saying "you too" when the waiter says, "enjoy your meal," and then having to live with that moment replaying in my head for the next 17 years. Story 7. Mice, the smaller the scarier. They are fast as lightning. I could probably muster the courage to kick a big rat, but those little ones disappear as quickly as they appear. Story 8. Getting trampled. I hate large crowds, and every time I am in one, my mind starts spinning about mob mentality, and then panic starts to set in. I never wear flip-flops in a crowd. Always tennis shoes. Story 9. The dentist. The last one I went to really messed up my mouth, and I have been severely neglecting going because of it. Story 10. I really do not like when people walk behind me. I either speed up or step to the side. It makes me feel uncomfortable. Story 11. Stairs. Not heights, but the stairs themselves. One wrong trip and not catching yourself in time could literally ruin the rest of your life. Story 12. Every time I am at a stoplight with a car next to me, I feel overwhelming anxiety that I am going to get shot. I do not know where this started or why. All I know is I hate sitting at stoplights. Story 13. Running out of toilet paper in public restrooms. I always check if there is enough, and that determines whether I go or not. Story 14. Ever since I became pregnant, I have worried a lot about crashing off bridges. I do not drive on many bridges, but I think about it more than usual. I worry about how I will be able to protect myself and my loved ones. Story 15. I'm afraid that I will leave my children in a hotel room and then forget which room they are in, making it difficult to find them. The thing is, I go to a hotel only once a year, and I only started doing this when my children were already preteens and old enough to take care of themselves. This has never actually happened. Story 16. Not now, but when I was a child, I was afraid that a volcano would erupt in my backyard in Indiana. Story 17. I have an irrational fear of blue screens. Yes, blue screens make me very scared, and I do not know why. The thing is, I usually know how to fix the problems that cause a blue screen to appear, but I cannot do it because it is too scary for me. I can do the work, but I usually get someone else to use the unified extensible firmware interface for me because of the fear. I am not joking about this. This is my irrational fear. Story 18. Being perceived by playing my music in front of someone. Don't ask why, but I don't know. I'll purposely skip a song if I don't think they will like it, even if I do. Story 19. Sinkholes. The home you have, everything you have built, all of it can just be gone, as well as anyone unfortunate enough to be in its grasp when it happens. They are like Earth's equivalent to a black hole in space. Story 20. Mayonnaise. Just thinking about it triggers my gag reflex. I avoid restaurants that put mayonnaise on their food by default. I always assumed it was just me, but then I found out mayophobia is a real thing. Story 21. Planes flying into buildings. Every time I see a plane fly low, it makes me almost freeze with anxiety. For reference, I had just turned 6 when September 11th happened. Story 22. Getting run over by a car and being so disfigured that they have to use the identification cards in my bag to know what I looked like and who I was. Also, an unrelated fear. Whenever I am walking behind people, I get paranoid that they think I am stalking them. That is part of the reason I try to walk faster than them so I do not get stuck behind them. Story 23. Standing too close to subway train rails and someone pushing me in as the train is coming. I have seen a man try to commit suicide on the elevated train in Chicago. He panicked at the last second, but the train caught his leg. This was after a Future Islands show at the Chicago Theater. I will never forget the screams. Story 24. I do not know if I can describe it in exact words, but I hate heights. It is not that I do not peer down from an airplane or a tower, but I hate heights like on the pendulum swing ride or the Columbus boat at the fair. I hate heights when I do not have control over the altitude I am reaching. I absolutely hate the Columbus ride. Story 25. Ever since I was a little kid, I have had an irrational fear of overflowing toilets. I used to have a recurring dream where I wandered through a warehouse full of rows of toilets all gently overflowing. The water looked clean, so it was not a gross-out thing, just something about water spilling where it should not be. I am in my 50s now, and it has not bothered me in decades, but I still get a faint twinge every time I flush a toilet. Story 26. Hotel hallways. Between a childhood nightmare, getting lost once, and a general semi-irrational fear of a stranger pulling me into their room, I have anxiety about being in the hall too long. I do not want to make the tragedy of Elisa Lam's death about me, but that event definitely did not help my fear. Story 27. I do not have an oddly specific fear, but my sister has an irrational fear of Saturn. It makes her knees weak, her stomach hurt, and she says her brain shakes. Story 28. Looking up at the sky and seeing a long rope hanging from it. I do not know, I just had a dream about it the other night, and that is a new fear unlocked. Story 29. Reverse gravity. Falling into space. Yes, I know how impossible it is, but could you imagine? Story 30. I am terrified of the high-voltage power lines that run along the freeway here in Australia. I am also afraid of radio towers and wind turbines, though to a lesser extent. Story 31. Choked as an infant. I cannot shake the fear that this is how I am going to die. Choking deaths are quite common. Story 32. Dislocating my knee to the point where I cannot click it back into place. I am 6 feet tall with patella alta. It is very scary because my knees dislocate randomly, even if I step wrong. Story 33. I am terrified of accidentally swallowing a loose dental filling and choking on it. I check my mouth after every meal like a paranoid dentist. Story 34. I wouldn't say it's oddly specific, but birds, especially pigeons, bother me. They are everywhere all the time, always in my space and constantly flapping their wings. I really dislike them. Story 35. Irrational fear of mirrors in the dark. It is obvious I am not alone in this, due to many folklore beliefs and tales. For example, mirrors are said to be entrances to other worlds, and the dead are believed to rise if their spirits see themselves in a mirror within 40 days of death. I cannot sleep with a mirror in the room. I cannot shake the feeling that something is watching me. I dislike mirrors in the dark because sometimes light plays on them and creates the illusion of movement. Yes, I know it is irrational and nonsense. Still, I am fearful. Story 36. First of all, I want to start by saying I believe in the afterlife, heaven, and hell. My fear is dying and going to hell. Purgatory is not paradise, but I would accept staying there, knowing that eventually I will get to heaven. I do not know if this makes sense. Also, keep the non-believer stuff to the non-believers. Leave me be. Story 37. The fear of asking my parents simple questions that would make me very happy and have little impact on their lives, which they would probably agree to without much struggle. Story 38. When I was a child, I was scared by the loud sound that electric hair clippers made when first turned on, especially when there was hair stuck in them. I hated getting my hair cut because of it. Story 39. Ugh. Wasps. I can't help it. I'm so afraid of them that my mom used to say I'd sooner jump out of a multi-story building just to get away from one. And she's right. This is bad. I've never been stung, thank the gods, but I have gone to ridiculous lengths to avoid them. I'm also terrified of car crashes, more specifically going off a cliff or into water. The latter has already happened once when I was a kid. The van I was in was driven into a lake. The rest comes from traumatizing stories my mom would tell me as a little kid, combined with having been a passenger in at least 3 different car wrecks and being hit twice, both hit and runs. I can hide this fear pretty well, but it occasionally comes out when people text and drive, hit rumble strips constantly, or are otherwise blatantly reckless. Story 40. If I am playing on my phone, I make sure the camera is not pointed at other people. I do not want to be falsely accused of snapping a picture of somebody. Story 41. Being connected to hospital machines during an earthquake. I have never experienced an earthquake or felt one. However, while lying in a hospital some years ago, I developed a fear of being connected to machines during an emergency. Story 42. I am always scared of rolling my ankle. It has happened a few times in my life badly. However, it has not happened in at least 15 years. I dislike walking on the edge of a sidewalk or curb, or on any uneven surfaces. I also generally feel uncomfortable in the desert and with the people who live there. Story 43. Since I had to leave my immediate family behind and am living in a foreign place, although I have a friend or two here, if something were to happen to me, no one would be informed, no one would know, and no one would know how to obtain the information. Story 44. Not so much a fear, but rather just a very uneasy feeling, I guess. There is a very specific stretch of highway about 60 to 70 miles south of my house that we drive through whenever going anywhere south. It is only about 5 to 6 miles long, takes less than 10 minutes to go through, and by all accounts is completely normal with no indication that anything is out of the ordinary. For some unknown reason, my hair stands on end the entire time we drive it. Every single time. My heart rate climbs, my spine starts tingling, and my hands grip the steering wheel tighter. For absolutely no reason at all. It is not scary, it is not out of contact, it is not abandoned. There are houses, restaurants, gas stations, and even a drive-in movie theater. But my body nearly goes into fight or flight every time we go there. Story 45. Bridges. I hate going over them and am always worried they will collapse. I fully know this is unlikely and unreasonable, but I have had this fear my entire life and from as early as I can remember. Nothing bad has ever happened to me on a bridge, but still, every single time. Story 46. Cats. I have a fear that every cat is going to attack me and bite my neck while scratching my eyes. I fear that in a room full of people, they will find me just to attack me. Story 47. I have heard stories of people being pregnant and still getting their period. That is my fear. Story 48. I have a deep fear of deep frying. The sight of it makes me recoil. I am, however, very happy to eat the delicious deep-fried morsels. Story 49. Clocks. I guess I would not call it a fear exactly, but it is oddly specific because it is only certain models that I do not like. Hearing the sound of a clock ticking when I am awake in the middle of the night quietly freaks me out. Story 50. Since having a child, I worry about all the terrible, insane, and unlikely things that could happen to her. I once had a thought, oh my God, what if she fell down the return air vent and got trapped in the ducts? I have to constantly check the catastrophizing part of myself and say, bro, what are you talking about? Otherwise, I would go crazy. Story 51. I have several fears, some from my past. I am terrified of basketball, not the ball itself, but the game. I am deathly afraid of one specific hotel. I have driven past it once and nearly freaked out. I have claustrophobia, which is the fear of being trapped, but I love escape rooms, privacy, and very tight hugs. I am only afraid if I don't have some sense of control and have been like this literally since the day I was born. I fear not having control, not total control, but some sense of it. I tremble walking up and down stairs, absolutely terrified that I will fall. I am also afraid of cockroaches, and I live in Australia, so they can be huge. This fear started because, as a joke and punishment, my father put a live cockroach in my hair when I was 10. I am also afraid of my old house. I used to have panic attacks walking past it after school because it was right across the road. Lastly, I have an irrational fear that if I point out serious medical symptoms to someone, they will die. I told my grandmother that I didn't like the sound of her cough when I was 11, and she died 9 months later of lung cancer. I told my mother to go to the doctor about her difficulty breathing, and she nearly died from clots in her lungs. I am no longer in contact with my father, as he is the cause of many of these fears, and I fear him as well. He will never be part of my life again. Story 52. I fear that whatever I have done in my life is all a strange dream compressed into a few minutes of reality. that I wake up as a brain in a vat or in a car in a wreck on a hospital bed dying. Story 53. Every time I am in public, I worry that I might be involved in a mass shooting, whether at the grocery store, gas station, or mall. It is a horrible feeling. Story 54. Getting an amoeba infection, especially Naegleria fowleri, also known as brain-eating amoeba. I do not go into any wild body of water, aside from the ocean, or into swimming pools unless I know that the pool has been well maintained. Story 55. Having my period while presenting to a public audience. I have endometriosis, and before I was diagnosed, I once had blood dripping down my leg. I immediately requested a bathroom break to clean up. Fortunately, my skirt was just long enough to cover it. Now I always wear protection just in case. Story 56. My husband travels frequently, and we have a small child. I worry about falling and hitting my head and how long it would take for someone to find me. How long would he be sitting alone, crying, and so on? Would something bad happen to him without supervision? I had never thought about this until we had our son. Story 57. Fecal particles. The toilet seat is down during flushing, and I exhale while flushing in hopes of reducing them further. Story 58. Do you know how people with trypophobia, the fear of small holes, feel disgusted even looking at them? Imagine that with boats. Do I fear drowning? No, I am a competitive swimmer. Do I get seasick? No, I have an iron stomach. But just looking at a really big boat, like a cargo ship, I know it floats because of physics, but every part of it seems wrong and I want to vomit. Story 59. Kraken. I discovered when I jumped off a sailboat into the ocean that I had kraken-based fears. This is possibly related to watching 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea as a kid. Story 60. I have an irrational fear of falling to the point where I do not climb ladders or like leaning over balconies. I have poor balance, so I would never cross a narrow plank of wood or climb scaffolding. I am not sure why, as nothing has happened to prompt this fear. Story 61. My window air conditioning unit started on fire. There is a low chance of this happening, but when I was about 4 years old, I was taking a walk with my dad around the neighborhood on a summer evening. We walked past the school, and there was an air conditioner in one of the classroom windows. It was on fire. This was before everyone had cell phones, so my dad had to go knock on doors to get someone to call emergency services. It turned out a staff member had been working earlier that day and forgot to turn it off when they left. The fire was put out quickly, and the building was fine, but it still makes me nervous sometimes. Story 62. Cockroaches. I do not know what their problem is, but they have to come near your body at night. Sometimes they even fly into my bed. Jesus Christ, they stink terribly. Story 63. My newest irrational fear is driving past the shooting range while people are shooting. I am terrified that a bullet will ricochet and hit me or someone else in the car. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.